Welcome dear audience students and scholars. Here I am Dr. Amjad Ali. In this video we are going to discuss about explaining fluctuations with the IS and LM model. Dear scholars, once Paul Samuelson said that science is a parasite. The greater the patient population, the better the advance in psychology and pathology, and out of pathology arises therapy. The year 1932 was true of the Great Depression, and from its root and soul was belatedly good a new subject that today we call macroeconomics. Dear scholars, we have assembled the pieces of IS and LM model as a step toward understanding the short-run economic fluctuation. We have seen that the IS curve represents the equilibrium in the market for the goods and services, that the LM curve represents the equilibrium in the market for the real money balances, and that the IS and LM curves together determine the interest rate and national income in the short run when price level is fixed. Now we turn our attention to the applying the IS and LM model to analyze the three major issues. The first, we examine the potential causes of fluctuations in national income. Second, we discuss how the IS and LM model fits into the model of aggregate supply and aggregate demand. Third, we examine the Great Depression of 1930s. Dear scholars, the intersection of IS and LM curve determine the level of national income. When one of these curves shifts, the short-run economic fluctuations also occurs, and national income also fluctuate when one of these curves shifts. In this video, we examine how changes in policy and shocks to the economy can cause these curves to shift. So let's discuss how fiscal policy shifts the IS curve and changes the short-run equilibrium. We begin by examining how changes in fiscal policy, government purchases and taxes alter the economy's short-run equilibrium. First, recall that changes in fiscal policy influence the planned expenditure and thereby shift the IS curve. The IS and LM model shows how these shifts in the IS curve affect the income and the interest rate. So let's discuss first that how the changes in government purchases affect the equilibrium of the economy. Okay, changes in government purchases. Consider an increase in government purchases of delta G. The government purchases multiplier is the Keynesian cross tells us that this change in fiscal policy raises the level of income at any given interest rate by delta G over 1 minus MPC. So let's see a graphical presentation for that. An increase in government purchases in the IS and LM model. We have income output Y on x-axis, we have interest rate R on y-axis, we have LM model, LM curve, and we have IS curve. Downward sloping IS curve and upward sloping LM curve. We know that the intersection of IS and LM curve will decide the equilibrium income of the economy and equilibrium interest rate of the economy. So here we have the intersection of IS and LM curve at point A. So here an increase in government purchases shifted the IS curve to the rightward. So IS curve shift to the rightward by G over 1 minus MPC. So our IS curve shift to the rightward from IS1 to IS2. So we know that the intersection of IS and LM curve will decide the equilibrium level. So we have a new equilibrium level at point B, and we have a rise in national income because of rise in government purchases, and we have a new level of national income, that is Y2, and we have a rise in interest rate from R1 to R2. So this figure shows that IS curve shift to the rightward by amount that we have G over 1 minus MPC normally we call it delta G over 1 minus MPC. The equilibrium of the economy moves from point A to point B. The increase in government purchases raises both our national income from Y1 to Y2 and interest rate from R1 to R2. To understand fully what happens actually in the figure, it helps to keep in mind the building block for the IS and LM model from our previous video, the Keynesian cross and the theory of liquidity preference. Here is the story. When government increases its purchases of goods and services, the economy's planned expenditure rises. The increase in planned expenditure stimulates the production of goods and services, which causes total income to rise from Y1 to Y2. These effects should be familiar with the Keynesian cross, and this also increases the interest rate from R1 to R2. Okay, while talking about changes in government purchases, now consider the money market as described by the theory of liquidity preference. Because the economy's demand for money depends on income, the rise in total income increases the quantity of money demanded at every interest rate. The supply of money has not changed. However, so higher money demand causes the equilibrium interest rate R to rise from R1 to R2, as we have discussed in our graphical presentation. The higher interest rate arising in the money market in turn has ramification back to the goods market. When the interest rate rises, firms cut back on their investment plans. Okay, this fall in investment partially offset the expansionary effect of increase in government purchases. Thus, the increase in income in response to a fiscal expansion is smaller in the IS and LM model than it is in the Keynesian cross, where we have investment assumed to be fixed. So here you see that in the graphical presentation that the horizontal shift, the IS curves equal the rise in equilibrium in income in the Keynesian cross. The amount is larger than the increase in equilibrium income here IS and LM model. The difference is explained by the crowding out of investment due to higher interest rate. Changes in taxes. In the IS and LM model, changes in taxes affect the economy much the same as changes in government purchases do, except that taxes affect the expenditure through consumption. Consider, for instance, a decrease in taxes of delta T. The taxes cut encourages consumer to spend more and therefore increases planned expenditure. The tax multiplier in the Keynesian cross tells us that this change in policy raises the level of income at any given interest rate by delta T cross MPC over 1 minus MPC. So let's see a graphical presentation that how changes in taxes affect the equilibrium level of the economy. So a decrease in taxes in the IS and LM model. So we have income output Y on x-axis, we have interest rate R on y-axis, we have a upward sloping LM curve, and we have a downward sloping IS curve. We know that the intersection of IS and LM curve will decide the equilibrium income of the economy Y1, and we have equilibrium interest rate R1. Okay, decrease in taxes shifted the IS curve to the rightward, so we have a shift in the IS curve by delta T cross MPC over 1 minus MPC. So we have a new IS curve, that is IS2, and we know that the intersection of IS and LM curve will decide the equilibrium income, and our equilibrium income is rises from y1 to y2, and we have a new equilibrium level that is B, at point B, and at point B we have a higher level of interest rate. We have a rise in interest rate. That new interest rate is R2. So these figures illustrate that IS curve shift to the right by this amount, or this amount delta T cross MPC over 1 minus MPC. The equilibrium of the economy moves from point A to point B. The tax cut raises both income and interest rate, income from y1 to y2 and interest rate from r1 to r2. Once again, because the higher interest rate depresses investment, the increase in income is smaller in the IS and LM model than it is in Keynesian cross. Okay, here we have another topic, that is how monetary policy shifts the LM curve and changes the short run equilibrium. We now examine the effect of monetary policy. Recall that a change in the money supply alters the interest rate that equilibrates the money market for any given level of income and thus shifts the LM curve. Okay, the IS and LM model shows how a shift in the LM curve affect the income and interest rate. Consider an increase in the money supply. An increase in M leads to an increase in real money balances M over P, because the price level P is fixed in the short run. Okay, let's see a graphical presentation for that, how monetary policy shifts the LM curve and changes the short run equilibrium. Okay, because we know that the theory of liquidity preference shows that for any given level of income, an increase in real money balances leads to a lower interest rate in the economy. Okay, a decrease in the money supply in the IS and LM model, we have income output Y on x-axis, we have interest rate R on y-axis, and we have upward sloping LM curve, and we have a downward sloping IS curve. So the intersection of IS and LM curve will decide the equilibrium income of the economy, and the economy is at equilibrium at point A. Okay, at point A we have interest rate R1. So an increase in the money supply shift the LM curve downward. So we have a new LM curve, LM2, and we know that the intersection of IS and LM curve will decide the equilibrium income, and we have a rise in national income from Y1 to Y2 at point B, and at point B we have a lower interest rate, because we know that by raising the supply of money we have a lower level of interest rate, and we have a downward interest rate, that is our new interest rate R2. So the equilibrium moves from point A to point B. The increase in money supply lowers the interest rate and raises the level of national income. Once again, to tell the story that explains the economy's adjustment from point A to point B, we rely on building block of the IS and LM model, the Keynesian cross and the liquidity theory of preference. This time we begin by a money market, where the monetary policy actions occur when Federal Reserve Bank in case of US, or State Bank of Pakistan in case of Pakistan, increases the supply of money. People have more money than they want to hold at the prevailing interest rate. As a result, they start depositing this extra money in banks or using it to buy bonds. the interest rate are then falls until people are willing to hold all the extra money at the Federal Reserve Bank has created or central bank has created. This brings the money market to new equilibrium from point A to point B. This will lower the interest rate from R1 to R2. This lower interest rate in turn has a ramification for the goods market. A lower interest rate stimulates the planned investment, which increases the planned expenditure, production and income from Y1 to Y2. Thus, we have here one of the main things, that is monetary transmission mechanism. The IS and LM model shows that monetary policy influences income by changing the interest rate. This conclusion sheds light on our analysis of monetary policy. In the short run, when prices are sticky, an expansion in the money supply raises income. But we did not discuss how a monetary expansion induces greater spending on goods and services, a process called the monetary transmission mechanism. Okay, the IS and LM model shows an important part of that mechanism. An increase in the money supply lowers the interest rate, which stimulates investment and thereby expands the demand for goods and services. In coming videos, we will try to discuss all these things when we have an open economy, and then the exchange rates also has an important role in the monetary transmission mechanism for larger economies such as the United States or any other open and developed economy. However, interest rate has also a leading role while monetary transmission mechanism. Okay, the intersection between the monetary and fiscal policy. When analyzing any change in the monetary or fiscal policy, it is important to keep in mind that the policy makers who control these policy tools are aware of what the other policy makers are doing. A change in one policy, therefore, may influence the other, and this interdependence may alter the impact of a policy change. For example, suppose Congress raises taxes, then we have one of the main questions, that what effect will this policy have on the economy? According to the IS and LM model, the answer depends on how Fed responds to the tax increase, or we can say that how the central bank responds to this increase in taxes. So let's see a graphical presentation for that. We have here the response of the economies to a tax increase. In first panel, we are going to discuss about the Fed holds money supply constant, or we can say that the central bank holds the money supply constant. We have income output Y on x-axis, we have interest rate on y-axis, and we have upward sloping LM curve, and we have a downward sloping IS curve, and we know that the intersection of IS and LM curve will decide the equilibrium of the economy. And here we are at equilibrium at A. So tax increase shifts the IS curve downward. So we have IS2 here, and we have a decrease in taxes, and we have a decrease in income as well. Sorry, an increase in taxes will lower the interest rate in the economy. We have a lower level of interest rate, and we have a new equilibrium at point B. So this part shows that when central bank hold the money supply constant, so see here we have constant money supply, the tax increase shifts the IS curve to the leftward or downward. Income fall from Y1 to Y1 because higher taxes reduce consumer spending and interest rate also fall. So see here we have a downward interest rate trend. Because lower income reduces the demand for money, the fall in income indicates the we have a tax hike, which also causes a recession in the economy. So while talking about the response of the economy to a tax increase, we have another graphical presentation that Fed holds the interest rate constant. We are going to discuss another graphical presentation. We have income output Y on x-axis, we have interest rate on y-axis, and we have a upward sloping LM curve, and we have a downward sloping IS curve, and we have at equilibrium point A, and here we have that level of income and that level of interest rate. Okay, now an increase in taxes will shift the IS curve downward, and we have a new IS curve, that is IS2 here, and we have a flexible monetary policy because we are holding interest rate as a constant. So holding interest rate constant, central bank contracts money supply. So we have a new money supply curve here. So this will also decreases the national income from this point to this point because we are holding interest rate as a constant. So we have a new equilibrium at point B. So this graph presents that when central bank wants to hold the interest rate constant, in this case when interest rate is constant, the taxes increase shift the IS curve to the leftward or downward. The central bank must decrease the money supply to keep the interest rate at its original level. This fall in the money supply shifts the LM curve to the leftward or upward. The interest rate does not fall, but income falls by a large amount. So see here we have a large decrease in income than if the central bank had held the money supply constant, where we have discussed in our previous video. So in this graphical presentation we see that if by keeping the interest rate constant, by increasing the interest rate, the economy is also moving towards the recession. Let's see another graphical presentation when the central bank or Fed hold the income constant. When holding the income constant, then what will be the equilibrium of the economy will actually happen. Okay, here we have income output Y on x-axis, we have interest rate on y-axis, and we have a upward sloping curve LM1, and we have a downward sloping IS curve, and we know that the intersection of IS and LM curve will decide the equilibrium of the economy, and at this point we have this level of income and this level of interest rate. Okay, now by keeping the income constant, an increase in taxes shift the IS curve downward. So we have a new IS curve, and by holding the income constant, central bank expand the money supply, and we have a downward or rightward shift in LM curve. So our LM curve will shift rightward, and that LM curve will intersect the IS curve, new IS curve at point B, So at this point we have a new equilibrium and we have a reduction in our interest rate from this point to this point. So this part of graph present that central bank wants to prevent the taxes increase from lowering income. It must therefore raises the money supply and the shift of LM curve from LM1 to LM2 downward, which will try to offset the shift in IS curve. In this case, the tax increase does not cause a recession, but it does not cause a large fall in interest rate. Therefore, level of income does not change. So see, we have a fixed level of income. The combination of tax increase and monetary expansion does not change the allocation of the economy resources. So higher tax depresses the consumption, while the lower interest rate stimulates investment. Income is not affected because these two effects exactly balance one another. For example, we can see that the impact of a change in fiscal policy depends on the policy that central bank pursues, that is on whether it holds the money supply, the interest rate, or the level of income constant. More generally, whenever analyzing a change in one policy, we must make an assumption about its effect on the other policy. The most appropriate assumption depends on the case at hand and many political considerations that lies behind economic policy making. Next, we have shocks in the IS and LM model. Because the IS and LM model shows how national income is determined in the short run, we can use the model to examine how various economic disturbances affect income. So far, we have been seeing that how changes in fiscal policy shift the IS curve and how changes in the monetary policy shift the LM curve. Similarly, we can group other disturbance into two categories. The first one is shocks to the IS curve and shocks to the LM curve. Shocks in the IS and LM curve. Okay, while talking about the shocks in the IS curve are exogenous changes in the demand for goods and services. Some economists, including Keynes, have emphasized that such changes in demand can arise from investors, animal spheres, exogenous and perhaps self-fulfilling waves of optimism and pessimism. For example, suppose that firms become pessimistic about the future of the economy and that this pessimism causes them to build fewer new factories. This reduction in the demand for investment goods causes a contractionary shift in the investment function. At every interest rate, firms want to invest less. The fall in investment reduces the planned expenditure and shifts the IS curve to the leftward, reducing income and employment. This fall in equilibrium income in part validates the firm's initial pessimism. Okay, while talking about the shocks in the IS and LM curve, shocks to the IS curve may also arise from changes in the demand for consumer goods. Suppose, for instance, that the election of a popular president increases consumer confidence in the economy. This induces consumers to save less for the future and consume more today. We can interpret this change as an upward shift in the consumption function. So this shift in the consumption function increases planned expenditure and shifts the IS curve to the right, and this raises income. So while talking about the shocks in the IS and LM curve, shocks to the LM curve arise from exogenous change in the demand for money. Okay, for example, suppose that new restrictions on credit card availability increase the amount of money people choose to hold. According to the theory of liquidity preference, when money demand rises, the interest rate necessary to equilibrate the money market is higher for any given level of income and money supply. So hence, an increase in money demand shifts the LM curve upward, which tends to raise the interest rate and depress the level of income in the economy. So in summary, several kind of events can cause economic fluctuation by shifting the IS curve or the LM curve. Remember, however, that such fluctuations are not inevitable. Policymakers can try to use the tools of monetary and fiscal policy to offset exogenous shocks. If policymakers are sufficiently quick and skillful, or we can say that they are experienced, they check the shocks to the IS and LM curve need not to lead the fluctuations in the income or employment. So we have to discuss here that what is the central bank or Fed's policy instrument, the money supply or the interest rate. Okay, our analysis of the monetary policy has been based on assumption that central bank or Fed influences the economy by controlling the money supply. By contrast, when the media report on changes in central bank policy, they often just say that the central bank has raised or lowered interest rate. So here, which is right, even though these two views may seem different both for the correct, and it is important to understand why this happens. So in recent years, the central bank or Fed of US central bank has used the federal funds rate, the interest rate that banks charge one another for overnight loans, as its short-run policy instrument. When the Federal Open Market Committee meets every 6 weeks to set monetary policy, it votes on a target for this interest rate that will apply until the next meeting. After the meeting is over, the Fed's bond traders who are located in New York are told to conduct the open market operation necessary to hit that target. These open market operations change the money supply and shift the LM curve so that the equilibrium interest rate determined by the intersection of the IS and LM curve equals the target interest rate that the Federal Open Market Committee has chosen. Okay, while talking about what the Fed's policy instrument, the money supply or the interest rate. So as a result of this operating procedure, Fed policy is often discussed in terms of changing interest rates. Keep in mind, however, that behind these changes in interest rates are necessary changes in the money supply. A newspaper might report, for instance, that the Fed has, or central bank has, lowered interest rates. To be more precise, we can translate this statement as a meaning that the Fed Open Market Committee has instructed the Fed bond traders to buy bonds in open market operation so as to increase the money supply, shift the LM curve and reduce the equilibrium interest rate to hit a new lower targets. So here we have one of the main questions which rises due to these conditions, that why has the Fed or central bank chosen to use an interest rate rather than the money supply as its short-term policy instrument? One possible answer is that shocks to the LM curve are more prevalent than shocks to the IS curve. When Fed or central bank targets interest rate, it automatically offsets LM shocks by adjusting the money supply, although this policy exacerbates IS shocks. So if LM shocks are the more prevalent type, then a policy of targeting the interest rate leads to greater economic stability than a policy of targeting the money supply. We will discuss in our coming video that when the short-run fluctuation to include the explicitly a monetary policy that target the interest rate and that changes in its target in response to economic fluctuation. The IS and LM model presented here in this video is a useful foundation for that more complicated and realistic analysis. One lesson from the IS and LM model from this video is that when a central bank sets the money supply, it determines the equilibrium interest rate, thus in some way setting the money supply and setting the interest rate are two sides of the same coin. So this is all about explaining fluctuation with the IS and LM model. So see you with another video. Ciao.